of distraction. Focus on your word. Help us to pull good lessons from the Book of Judges tonight, and bless everybody who's here. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. All right. Well, like to thank everybody who has chosen to come to another edition of Apocalypse Bible Study. um, uh, no, thanks again. Thanks for coming, guys. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe out there. I know it's getting pretty crazy in certain states. So we will definitely pray about that on our way out tonight. We're going to be wrapping up the Book of Judges tonight. Tentatively titled tonight, "It Could Be Worse," um, and it is in the Book of Judges. Yeah, we'll go through that. Before we do, we're in the final epilogue. So there's 2 epilogues to the Book of Judges. We're in the second one. What happened the last couple weeks? Where did we leave off last week?
Nobody in Israel likes each other. That's probably poor summation. But it feels like it.
Yeah, specifically, nobody in Israel likes Benjamin, and vice versa. Yeah. Good. So, big war between the rest of the tribes and Benjamin. Who wins?
Which part? Israel the third time around.
Yeah. It's sort of a trick question. Well, you can argue that nobody really wins, but Benjamin certainly loses the most, right? You guys have heard the term Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus was the guy in history who beat the Romans a couple times. The second time he beat the Romans, his guys are like, "Hey, you won." He's like, "Yeah, I need more victories like that, and we're undone," because he lost so many guys. That was kind of what happened to Israel. They got decimated in the original sense of the term, where they lost 40,000 guys. They eventually wind up beating Benjamin, and when they beat Benjamin, they go into this battle frenzy, right? And they start absolutely wiping everybody out. They wipe out the men, the women, the children. Only 600 guys survive. That's kind of where we leave it last week. What kicked this off? What was the impetus for this civil war? Yeah. Yeah, the Levite's concubine gets raped. The Levite cuts her up, sends her to the 12, the 11 other 11 tribes. They show up and they go to war with Benjamin. Okay, question: do they ask God if they should go to war with Benjamin before they do? The rodent is indeed wise and spot the trick question. They did not ask God if they should go to war with Benjamin. What
Good
do
job,
they ask God?
We talked about this last week. They ask who should go first.
Right, they ask who should go first. So it's not a theme not a huge theme in Hebrew literature. It's a major theme in Greek literature. But there's a theme in ancient literature that is be careful with oracles, right? So oracles are a word from God or the gods. It's really easy to in Greek literature to get a word from the gods and then to interpret the way you want to interpret. The reason why I bring that up, because it's not a huge theme in Hebrew literature, is the Israelites are acting kind of like pagans here, in a lot of ways, and God kind of treats them that way. He gives them the answer that they're looking for, not the answer to the question that they should be asking. So they get they get annihilated in their first battle, and they go again, and they get annihilated again. Then the third time, they go, "Hey, should we be doing this?" And God goes, "Yeah, I'll give you victory tomorrow." But they don't ask, "Should we be doing this?" to the third time. So they're trying to get the answer from God that they want, and God is giving them the answers that they're looking for, but they're not asking the right questions. So it's a very interesting thing. Okay, so they get to the end of that. They go on this killing spree. There's 600 guys from Benjamin left, only males. Okay, that's where we left off last week. This week we're going to be in Judges 21. And can I have a volunteer to read verses 1 through 7? Maybe fish sticks? Maybe? There we go.
He comes through eventually. I'll go ahead and take it, Unger.
Go ahead.
All right. Now, the men of Israel had sworn at Mizpah, "No one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin." And the people came to Bethel and sat there till evening before God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. And they said, "O Lord, the God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel?" And the next day the people rose early and built there an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the people of Israel said, "Which of all the tribes of Israel did not come in the assembly to the Lord?" For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." And the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin their brother, and said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel this day. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them any of our daughters for wives?"
Thank you. Okay. So we encounter a problem here. What's the problem that Israel has?
To put it gently, the only dudes left in Benjamin, and that not good.
Yeah, because they don't want to wipe out a full tribe, right? They're like, "Oh, oops."
Even though they kind of already did.
yeah. So why can't we just give the guys from Benjamin wives? And have there be families and stuff? Why can't we make that work? Yeah, they took an oath. And the oath was that none of the tribes are going to give the people from Benjamin any wives, right? Or they're not going to give any of their daughters as wives. Yeah. Okay. So, why did they take that oath? Yeah, a major theme in the Old Testament is definitely hasty vows get people in trouble. We've seen that in the book of Judges several times, right? So this is not the first time that we've seen this in the book of Judges, let alone the Old Testament. Well, we've talked about why people take oaths in the ancient world. Why do people take oaths? Now we take oaths and it's like, okay, I guess I can't lie because I took an oath. But why did they take it back then? Yeah, so it's a couple reasons. Wise Rat is certainly has part of it in that this is a society without legal contracts. So by going under oath, that's essentially you signing a contract, right? This is you saying for sure I'll do this. They would see like our contracts and treaties as like what does that mean? Why aren't you guys taking oaths? The other part of it is a big reason why people take oaths in throughout the ancient world is power, right? So for this, it is like Kessa said, ensure success in their endeavors, gratitude for their success. So they're saying, hey, there's no turning back, right? We're to mix metaphors, we're burning the boats. This is something that we're for sure gonna do. Like we're gonna ensure power. That if anybody tries to help Benjamin, we're gonna put them to death, right? So they figured we'll say, none of us are going to give our daughters as wives to Benjamin. Anybody does that, we're going to put them to death. So yeah, so we're going to make sure that we sign this contract, make a law, if you will. There's no turning back. The other reason is it gives you some power over the god, right? Or some power before the god. It's a way of manipulating the forces around you to your way of doing something. It's a pagan concept. It's something that the Israelites are told not to do, and yet we see their judges doing it. Um, like the time when somebody said that they're going to sacrifice the first thing that comes out of their house, right? So that's an element of it too. I think that there is an element of them trying to manipulate God going into this, and unilaterally throughout the Old Testament, anytime somebody takes an oath to try and manipulate God, it turns out badly. Okay, so think about the judge. Think about this. Think about this story when you encounter another story similarly in Kings. Okay, there's hyperlinks to other stories in this that we've talked about before. Okay, so oaths are taken, oftentimes try and manipulate the deity too, and that does not go well when you try to manipulate God in the Old Testament. Okay, so they take this oath for those reasons to try and make sure that everybody's on the same page, make sure there's no turning back, make sure you try and kind of get God's approval on this, manipulate God, put God's force behind it. Here's the problem now. like Cass said earlier, yeah, Saul, exactly, Cass, yeah. So like Cass said earlier, we didn't exactly think this all the way through, right? Like this wasn't the best thought out plan. Um, so the problem is now we realize, oh crap. So that might not have been a big deal if we hadn't gone on a killing spree and killed all the women in Benjamin, but now we did, and we can't give Benjamin our daughters as wives, and we can't give Benjamin other people's the neighboring people's daughters as wives. That's against the rules. Interesting. Now we're suddenly following all the laws and rules, which I just find somewhat grimly amusing. So they got to come up with a solution. Okay. So let's see what solution they land on. Okay. Let's look at Judges 8 through 12. I volunteered to read verses 8 through 12.
I can read it if like.
Go for it.
And they said, "What one is there of the tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah? And behold, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were mustered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent 12,000 of their bravest men there, and commanded them, Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male and every woman that has lain with a male you shall devote to destruction." And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man by lying with him. And they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan.
Thank you. Okay. So just one aside here for those of you who are familiar with the book of Samuel. In case you didn't think we were supposed to be hyperlinking into Samuel, the Jabesh Gilead reference confirms that we are. Because Jabesh Gilead plays a really key part throughout the whole Saul narrative. So yes, we are supposed to be thinking of Saul at this point. Okay, so that aside out of the way, what happens? What's their solution to their little puzzle that they got themselves in here? Right. So we're looking around going, okay, somebody in the group, some brilliant brilliant guy goes, hey, hell on. So the let's look at the oaths that we went over. And he's pouring over the contracts, right? Some lawyer. And he goes, okay, says here that these oaths were binding to the people who were here. Who wasn't here? And they find a city that didn't send anybody there. Jabesh Gilead, okay? Jabesh Gilead has pretty good relations with the tribe of Benjamin. We see that in the Samuel story as well. Um, so they did not send any guys there, perhaps because they, maybe they sympathize with Benjamin, whatever. Either way, they didn't send the guys there. So the congregation goes, okay, here's the plan. Here's the plan. We got an idea. What if we attacked them and then took their daughters and gave them to Benjamin? So excessive violence solved the problem. So the only way out is going to be more violence, right? That makes sense. So they go and they attack. They select these 1,200 guys, this kind of picked force to go attack the city of Jabesh Gilead. We get the impression that this is a huge city, right? 12,000 guys is enough to take it when we couldn't take one city with four, many times that numbers earlier. So they do it. They kill every male, every woman, so every woman who's married, and every child in the city. They leave the unmarried young women. They take those back. They give them to, and they're going to give them to Benjamin. Okay. All right. What do we think of this? Yeah, this is fairly violent. It tells us something about the culture. Not exactly an elegant solution, but it's certainly a solution. Fits with what we've been seeing, right? There's some sort of sick logic to this, though, right? Like, Doctor's kind of right. He's onto something. There is from a purely logical position, outside of anything resembling morality or relation to God, like this is a solution, right? If you're just running numbers and looking at spreadsheets and looking at the contracts, and Kessa is right. It really works. Where it makes sense is if you're looking at it from um, a pride perspective, right? A reputation thing and honor culture. So we annihilated Benjamin, but we can't wipe out our family. So now we got to provide for our family. Well, we can't violate our oath because that would look bad. Here's an idea: these guys who didn't come with us, we're already kind of mad at them because they should have come with us. Like that's what we said. If you're not on board, you're against us, right? So we can wipe out those guys and show that, hey, like when we call you up for forces, you better show up or else we're going to come after you. And then we also provide a solution for Benjamin. It really makes sense if you look at it through the lens of pride and honor. So put that in the back of your mind because we'll come back to that at the end and ask, is that the way we should be looking at this? Or the way that Israel should be acting? All right. But in the meantime, let's move on. This should solve the problem, right? So let's see if it solves the problem. Verses 13 through 16. Can I volunteer to read those? It's
I
short
can
and
read
there's no
it.
hard words. Just giving
Did you hear
guys a
me?
preview. Yep.
Okay. Then the whole congregation sent word to the people of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin returned at the time, and they gave them the woman whom they had saved alive of the woman of Jabesh Gilead, but they were not enough for them. And the people had compassion on Benjamin, because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, "What shall we do for our wives, for these who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin?"
Thank you. All right. So, interesting, they haven't made contact with these guys yet. They just realized, oh yeah, we wiped out all their wives. So they go and they send a peace delegation to the people who are the remnant of Benjamin at the Rock of Rimmon. And they go, hey, it's all good. Like, this is over now. Come on back. You can reoccupy your land. And as they're coming back, they go, hey, by the way, we got these wives for you. And oh crap, there's a problem. What's the problem? I mean, outside of the regular problems, what's the problem that the people of Israel see as a problem here?
Well, for one, they can't count.
Yeah, the problem is we've got 600 guys, right? And 400 wives. And what are we gonna do with the other 200 guys, right? Especially if we're gonna rebuild the tribe of Benjamin, every guy who's alive needs to be having kids, right? Because 600 people is not a lot left for a tribe. So we got a little bit of a problem here if we are Israel. This is also, by the way, another reason why I would argue that this is probably earlier in the timeline of Judges, because Benjamin is rebuilt to one of the bigger tribes in Judges or in Israel by the time of the Book of Samuel. So we know that they come back, but we have this problem. We got to get more wives. Okay. Do you guys? So if you're without reading ahead, if you don't know this story, what do you do now if you're Israel? Okay, some good suggestions in the chat. It's if we're the Israelite leaders sitting around talking this through, there's I think some of these came up, like probably. Probably
They've already
killed more dudes.
demonstrated they are very good at thinking outside the box.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody probably said, hey, like, what if we just, like, I don't know, broke the oath? That probably got shot down for the honor reasons as well. It's interesting, though. No, like, scribes pray for more virgins like manna. Nobody consults God. Nobody goes to God and is like, hey, like, what should we do about this? We didn't do it the first time, and so we just went wiped out a city and went and took a bunch of women. But instead, we're sitting around trying to lawyer this out. So let's take a look and see what solution they come up with next. Okay, verses 17 through 24. Stand by as I enter into the bot. There we go. Okay. Can I volunteer to read verses 17 through 24?
I can.
Go for it.
And they said there must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give them wives from our daughters. For the people of Israel had sworn, cursed be he who gives a wife to Benjamin. So they said, behold, there is the yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, at the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, the south of Lebanon. And they commanded the people of Benjamin, saying, Go and lie in ambush in the vineyards and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And when their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, Grant them graciously to us, because we did not take for each man of them his wife in battle, neither did you give them to them, else you would now be guilty. And the people of Benjamin did so, and took their wives according to their number from the dancers whom they carried off. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and rebuilt the towns and lived in them. And the people of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family, and they went out from every man to his inheritance.
Okay. So, the lawyers look at this, and they come up with a solution. What's the solution from the lawyers?
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah, the solution is, okay, if we don't give them wives, but they steal the wives, that could work, right? And then there's a silence in the council. Somebody goes, "Yeah, I think that works. Let's get Benjamin over here." So they bring Benjamin. They bring representatives from Benjamin over. They're like, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do the regular festival at Shiloh. Okay, when we do that, the daughters of the city are gonna come out and dance for us. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna steal them, and you're gonna get out of here. Okay, and then when you get out of there, just let us handle it, and just go back to your territory, and we'll be cool. Okay." So they do that, and the men of Shiloh are understandably upset. Okay, what do the leaders of Israel, the lawyers, come out and tell them? Just getting caught up on the chat as I wait. Yeah, they go. Hey! It's cool. It's cool. We're all out of this now, right? Because we all took an oath, said that we can't give these guys wives. Okay, but we had to get them wives, and we didn't look at it this way. We had to kill you guys and take wives, so that's positive, right? Right. And nobody had to break their oaths, so let's just call it a day, and we'll be good, right? Everything is good. And what did the people of Shiloh say? Yeah, they read through the contract and they go, "Okay, checks out." No, we joke about contracts, right? There's no actual written contracts of this. That's an analogy. But again, this is a honor culture where your word is really important. That's one of the reasons why they got themselves into this. And if you look at it, like, everything logically and legally makes sense. So everybody goes, "Okay, that checks out. Let's go home. We'll call it," and they do. And that's almost the end of the story. But that's the end of the narrative. Well, we got one verse left. One verse at the end I haven't read yet. I don't know about you. I'm left feeling a little unfulfilled. How do you guys feel about this? Are you okay with that conclusion to this 3-week slaughter fest that we've just had? Would you guys call this justice? No. Okay. If we've not forgotten the verse. We're gonna get to that last verse. Just hold on. It's not justice. It's just how it is, right? It is what it is, as the tautology goes. And it's weird, right? Because the rest of the book of Judges, except for the other epilogue, we've had this cycle of idolatry, bondage, repentance, deliverance, rest. Okay, and this doesn't fit the cycle. We have certainly a bondage or a terrible cataclysm. We don't really have repentance. We certainly, I mean, we get an end, but it's certainly not a not justice, right? We don't get deliverance. So let's take another step back and ask ourselves this: who caused this problem? Who brought this on Israel? How did we get here?
Yeah. I keep seeing Levite coming up, but I think you can trace it back a little further than that. To probably a lot more people.
Yeah, so let's not let the Levite off the hook, because he does kick this thing off by kind of lying about stuff, and also just generally ignoring advice in general. But it's more than just him who's responsible for this, right? In a greater sense, well, let's even ask this question. So the first chapter in this miniseries, 2 weeks ago, do you guys remember the names of anybody in the story? Give me one name of one person in the story with the Levite and the concubine. There isn't any. Okay. All right. Why did we say that was?
The names have been changed to protect the innocent. No, I don't know.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. Doctor's got it. We don't get any names throughout this entire story. It's the only story in Judges where we don't get any names. And the reason, I believe, is because it is, and Tim Keller also claims this, so it's not just me saying this as maybe I at least have one of the patron saints of the Bible study agreeing with me. What Tim Keller claims is that the reason we're not given any names is because this isn't the fault of one individual who we can lay this at the feet of. It's the fault of Israel. Okay. So, Israel brings this on Israel. Israel brings a civil war on herself because of why? What was the impetus of it? Yes, there's a lot of reasons. The original cause that Israel would claim, why did we start this? Why do we have to go wipe out Benjamin? Because somebody got raped, okay? So, there's lots of societal reasons for why that's bad, outside of just the moral reason of that's a sin, that's a terrible act. But there's societal reasons regarding honor and things we talked about. There's things wrapped up in that sub reasons. But somebody got raped. Okay. So, in response to that, we go on a killing spree. We almost wipe out a tribe. In order to not wipe out the tribe, because it's not good that our family should be reduced. Like we can't wipe out our own tribes. That's not honorable. We have to do what? What do we find ourselves with the lawyering and the legaling and the vows we've got ourselves into by our own wisdom? What do we have to do? Kill more people. Yep. So somebody got raped and killed. Okay, I should say that. Somebody got raped and killed, and that's what causes this. Okay. So in response to that, we go a killing, and then we have to do more killing, and what? Are these women that are going to be married to Benjamin, are any of them going willingly? No. No. So, in order to get ourselves out of the raping and killing, we go and we kill a bunch more people and we rape a bunch more people. Okay? So, do you guys see the irony in this? Of Israel trying to, outside of consulting God, outside of a king or God or someone telling them what to do, they're trying to do what they think is right here, based upon the vows and the situation they've got themselves in, and how it breeds more of the same sin, right? We talked about how Judges is dark cycles, and we see a dark cycle here. Yep. Yeah. And on our own power, which is what they're trying to do, because they're not consulting God. The only time they actually consult God is one time. When they go, hey, should we be doing this? It's after they lose 40,000 guys, right? They lose a tenth of their force. They get decimated. And they go, hey, some lawyer in the back goes, hey, did we ever ask God if we should do this, right? So that's the only time that God is consulted in this entire story. The rest is Israel trying to work their way out of this situation on their own power, okay? And that's where we get the last verse. So now, there's one last verse. I'll read it for you guys, and then we'll discuss it. The verse is verse 25. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Okay. So we see this motif repeated a few times, but I think this is pretty definitive as to the author's trying to leave us with this, right? So when you think of the time of the Judges, think of this story is what he's trying to say. This is what it was like in the time of the Judges. Now what do we take away from this? Now that we're done with this book and this story, what's one of the things what's one lesson we can walk away from this seemingly justiceless downward cycle that we saw here? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is indeed one of the morals that the scribe is trying to leave us with. So, within Jewish tradition, Judges is a justification of Samuel and Kings, of this is why we needed kings, right? This is why we can't have libertarianism. Um, that's what the scribe is saying, and that makes some sense, right? Like if this is written at the same time as Samuel and Ruth and some of those other books that are kind of defending the Judean kings or the Judean lineage of, hey, like you want to see what it's like without a king on the throne, like this is what it's like. And it certainly makes then some of the calls for a king make sense. But we as New Testament readers, and this is certainly importing a Christian bias into this, but I think that's certainly merited since we can read the Old Testament through New Testament lenses. We see from Samuel and Kings that the promise of a king in Israel is never fully realized, right? They have problems. Even David, who's the king after God's own heart, has a ton of problems. So what can we as Christians take away from this? Yeah. The Judean scribe is certainly onto something. He wants to leave us longing for a perfect king from the tribe of Judah. Unfortunately for him, this isn't going to happen the way that he necessarily thinks. We don't get a political king from the tribe of Judah that's perfect. We do get a different king, though. And he's a king that subverts a lot of the expectations, a king that seems to go against human wisdom, right? Instead of using force and violence and logic, if you will, to try and lawyer his way out of things, he enters into the pain and the suffering, submits to our punishment, and provides a way out through taking punishment instead of giving it out. He is everything that the kings in the books of Kings, aren't, right? So certainly for us, we can look at this in Judges and go, holy crap. Attempting to deliver ourselves, to save ourselves and improve ourselves and make ourselves perfect through human logic and human conventions is totally a hopeless cause. It's just going to make us worse, right? That's what happens with Israel. Israel is definitely no more righteous at the end of this story than they were at the beginning of it, okay? At the end of this story, we have a lot more dead people and a lot more women who are being raped than we do at the beginning, right? That doesn't take away from the violence and the terror in the beginning. We talked about that, how we're supposed to feel terrible about that first story. But this is worse. This is definitely one of those things where it's like, you think the problem's bad, wait till you see the solution, right? So the solution, trying to save ourselves, is worse than the problem. But if we could get a king, maybe, a perfect king, maybe we could get our way out of this. So everyone did what was right in their own eyes. There's another reference that we're being hyperlinked to there. And that would be the Garden of Eden. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Phrase is a mouthful. Okay. Adam and Eve were told not to eat of that on their own. There is a lot of Hebrew scholarship that claims that they were going to be given that by God in God's time. But the problem wasn't that they ate of the tree. The problem was they ate of the tree before God was going to give it to them. They weren't supposed to take of the fruit, but God could give it to them. Okay, so there is this theme in the Old Testament of there is kind of God's wisdom juxtaposed from human wisdom, and so at the beginning of God's wisdom, what's the beginning of God's wisdom?
According to Proverbs,
Yes.
the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Right. That would seem to line up with the Genesis story as well. Okay. So instead of everyone doing what's right in their own eyes, which is what they did here, right? According to them and their lawyering, this is the right thing to do to kill, rape all these people. What they should have been doing all along is submitting to God's direction and wisdom. And nobody's doing that in this story. So again, we see human wisdom juxtaposed with God's wisdom. So instead of somebody who's going to save us on human wisdom and our own strength and violence and pride, we need someone who is going to submit to God's will, submit to God, and show us the way through that. And we get that in the New Testament through Jesus, right? He's the perfect sacrifice. He says to God the Father, not my will, but your will be done, right? In Gethsemane. So that is the answer to the problem that we have here, that we're left with. This unfulfillment that we're kind of left with, which we're supposed to be left feeling that way. The answer is not to have no king. The answer is to have a perfect king. And to, instead of doing what's right in our eyes, submit to God's wisdom and God's direction as revealed in the Bible, as revealed in the person of Jesus and to do that. That's the way out. Trying to get out through logic and good works and and our own effort is only going to lead to more sin, right? Because we're not perfect. We have a bent towards evil ever since the garden. That's how I would sum this up. What I would take from this. What would you guys take from this? What other themes do you see from this book? Now that we're kind of at the end.
I think we talk about the cycle of judges. We all know what it is, but the image occurs to me that the longer you have a cycle is just a circle, and the circle just keeps getting more and more depressing. And if you have a cycle that keeps going and going and going and repeating over and over again, what you don't have is a bunch of circles. What you have is a drain. And where sin is allowed to pervade and there is no true, no real lasting revival or repentance, no spiritual growth within a land, that cycle repeats itself and eventually sin just pulls you down the drain. And that's what we saw happening with Israel time and time again. Every time a judge came up, it got worse and worse. And, it's just another way of saying, what Unger said, we need a perfect king. There's no human wisdom or human solution that gets us out of the predicament that we're in. But if we, the longer we remain in this predicament without finding a permanent solution, eventually the drain of sin just pulls us under.
No, that's a good point. Kess has a good point in the chat too about one of the great things about the Old Testament, and one of the reasons why I really like this book is it is telling reality as it really is, right? This story pulls zero punches. And I think that sometimes in the evangelical church we kind of whitewash the Bible. We talked about how the Micah story, no one had ever heard a sermon preached on that. I don't remember hearing very many sermons preached on these last 3 chapters of Judges either. But we tend to stick to the clean cut, here's a clear, easily digestible moral part, and we don't like some of these uncomfortable descent into chaos and madness stories. But they're very real, right? And we see this in the world around us. We see this in the relationships around us. I think it helps us make sense of that sometimes too. So that's one of the reasons why we do that around here. Why we will go into some of these passages because, I think it shows that the Bible is real and can certainly meet the darkness in our world today. Gideon is indeed the only judge in Protestant church. Sometimes Deborah too, but yeah, mostly just Gideon. Yeah, yeah, and the message of Samson is usually presented as watch out for seductive women. That's not that's not the message of Samson when you actually we talked about it. We don't have to review the whole thing, but yes. Okay, what else? Wise Rat and Kess have both posted some good stuff in the chat. Yeah, definitely on both those. One other theme that I see, and we kind of hit on it. It's certainly brought out again in 2 Samuel, really strongly, and it's that sin. The wages of sin is often that sin committed back to us, if you will. So, and often way more than we were hoping for. You reap what you sow, if you will. Yeah, exactly. And we see this with David and Absalom. But we see it here, right? Not affirming comment. No. but the the whole you reap what you sow thing is it not in a karmic sense of the universe is out to get you, but God designed the world in a way that actions have consequences, natural consequences, right? And the consequences of those actions are often eerily tied to the actions themselves. So we see that Israel is angry and wound up tight about a raping and a murder, right? And everybody involved in the story, both Israel and Benjamin, gets that those things happen to them tenfold, right? You go, well, Benjamin didn't get anybody raped. Let me tell you something about plundering. In the ancient Near East, the women in Benjamin who were killed were almost certainly raped before they were killed. So everybody, there's a ton of sexual violence and just violence in general in this story. And it all kind of stems from that initial thing. But as part of the cycle of the reaping and sowing, it gets worse, right? That's what we see. The sin not brought before God and not confessed and dealt with healthily, you will reap more of that than you ever thought of. And we see that happen here as well. The only way to break out of that cycle is through submitting it to a king. That's what Israel tries to do, but they get an imperfect king. We have the benefit of having a perfect king to this. So we all have sin and cycles in our life. I'm sure of it. And the way for us out this week is to bring it before God, to submit it to Him, to ask for forgiveness, and ask for His help out of this. Because Israel doesn't do that here, right? They don't ask for help out of the jam situation with Benjamin. They get it on their try to do it on their own. They wind up making the problem worse. So let's not do that this week. Yeah, that's a good point too, Cass. And we see that throughout the book of Judges. Even when Israel is rebellious, we see that God can't. He's like a parent who can't listen to the crying of his child, even if the child got themselves into this, right? And he has to intervene and help. So it's kind of an empty, like longing, almost hopeless note, which is what it's supposed to leave us on. However, there is hope in that we see God throughout this whole story never gives up on Israel and continues to go back. Because I think we look at this and we're like, holy crap, these people are freaking wicked, right? They're as bad, if not worse, than the people around them. And they think of themselves as a separate, better people. That was part of the theme here too. But they're as bad, if not worse, than the people around them. And yet, God never gives up on them. So Israel's merit doesn't come from themselves and them being better than everybody else. It comes from God loving them, right? That's the merit of Israel. And wanting to use them to reach the rest of the world. And God never gives up on that and never stops loving them and continues to provide ways for their salvation, even after stories like this. All right, that's all I got. You guys got anything else before we close out in prayer?
Well, on the subject